So today, what will I try to explain is that first I will try to explain the motivation and aim of the study, why we conducted such a study, and then I will briefly explain the literature review. It was more like a statistical approach for showing what is on in the literature in terms of AHP and ANP and fuzzy AHP and fuzzy ANP. And I will also talk about the extensions of fuzzy AHP and fuzzy ANP. And at the end, I will conclude and and give my further suggestions. And actually, this is an exciting topic for me because I actually wanted to discuss these issues with you. So this will be our views on these topics. But if you have other ideas, we can share and we can actually perhaps conclude to a point. So I'm really open to the questions and discussions. Please, at anywhere in the presentation, if you have any questions, just ask me. So it's not a typical conference presentation, let me say. So, just a minute. So maybe most of you know it, but I will briefly explain the fuzzy sets. Fuzzy sets have been introduced by Lütfizadeh in 1965. It enables dealing with uncertainty that is caused by imprecision, ambiguity, and vagueness. So when it's compared to the crisp normal mathematics, it has several advantages, but because it represents the human judgments better by actually representing the hesitancy and subjectivity in the human decision-making process. So when we have a decision problem, and this decision problem is heavily influenced by the human judgments, fuzzy sets are very useful tools for dealing with the hesitancy in the human judgments. So in the literature, a lot of studies use fuzzy sets for solving decision-making problems. Fuzzy sets have been introduced by Zade in 1965, but has been changed a lot during the years based on the definition of the fuzziness. And there are lots of extensions of fuzzy sets. Lütfizadeh himself actually made the first extension in 1975, and he actually developed type 2 fuzzy sets. And afterwards, Atanusov in 1986 developed intuitionistic fuzzy sets. In 2010, Toro has developed hesitant fuzzy sets. Jaeger 2013 Pythagorean fuzzy sets is also called type 2 intuitionistic fuzzy sets, and Atanusov at the similar years have developed a similar approach. And there is Jaeger's approach in Q-rank ortho pair fuzzy sets in 2017, picture fuzzy sets in 2015, spherical fuzzy sets in 2019. So there are lots of extensions. These are just some of the most commonly used extensions. And honestly, I think at some point there will be some eliminations. And I honestly think that some of these extensions are not that useful for either for the usage, because it increases the complexity. Also, it doesn't actually provide too much information about the fuzziness and uncertainty. But right now, there are lots of extensions of the fuzzy sets in the literature. And so what I think personally is that in 10 years, in 20 years, some of these extensions will be dominant and some of them won't be that dominant, and they will be eventually eliminated from the literature. So this is something that we are going to see in the future. So what I can say, what I already said before, fuzzy sets are very useful for representing subjective judgments in multi-criteria decision-making process. And when we look at the multi-criteria decision-making problems, AHP and ANP has a really strong impact on this area. And when we look at the overall literature, I think the most dominant approaches in the literature for multi-criteria decision-making includes AHP and ANP. So these are very strong tools that are commonly used for the decision makers for solving multi-criteria decision-making problems. So personally, what I think is that AHP and ANP is very strong and commonly used in the literature, successfully used in the literature. But sometimes when the people are not that, don't have that much knowledge on the field, when they have hesitancy, or there is a group that cannot, that doesn't have the same knowledge level, or that has different skills in their minds, we can use different approaches. So here comes the fuzzy set. So we know that humans are more successful in the qualitative predictions. They are not very successful in quantitative predictions, especially when they are not expert on the field. And AHP can deal both with quantitative and qualitative criteria, but when the decision makers are not that precise, or that doesn't have the same knowledge level, and when we deal with a group that doesn't have the same skills in their minds, I think fuzzy sets can be used. So the major difference between fuzzy AHP and ANP and AHP and ANP, I think the decision makers itself. So what I can say, what I will say, and what the literature actually will show us is that not every AHP and ANP should be fuzzy. Not every problem can be solved with, should be solved with fuzzy AHP and ANP. So in the literature, most of the decision-making problems will be solved by AHP and ANP, but there is a portion of it which will be solved with the fuzzy AHP and fuzzy ANP. So both AHP and ANP enables representing human knowledge. But when the decision makers are hesitant on the process and there are great differences among skills, fuzzy AHP and ANP methods can be used instead of AHP and ANP. But this shouldn't be every problem in the literature, I guess. So in the literature, both AHP and ANP methods have been modified by using fuzzy sets, especially the extensions of fuzzy sets. And here in the study, I will try to show the numbers of, it's not a real, I don't want to just go deep into the literature review. I just want to show the numbers. And I will talk about the usage of fuzzy AHP, extensions of fuzzy AHP in the literature. And while we are searching the literature review, we focused on the Scopus database. So we looked at the Scopus database, which actually is rather easy to use. We can make a really easy analysis based on it. And we looked at the usage of AHP, ANP, fuzzy AHP, and fuzzy ANP, and the extensions of fuzzy AHP and fuzzy ANP in the Scopus database. So this is the main difference between the scales, and actually Basar will explain what changes, what will be the difference between AHP and fuzzy AHP based on the methodology that we use, based on the scale that we use. So actually how we use the scale slightly, not slightly, but sometimes change the actually ranking of the alternatives. So this is, the first one is the classical scale and the second one is the fuzzy scale. And how we define the scale, as you can see, is that in the fuzzy scale, it is, and usually this is a simple example of triangular fuzzy. It's usually a interval that has some connections between two scales. So it's not like discrete. They have some continuity and there are some common areas in the scale. So this is the main difference between the fuzzy AHP and fuzzy ANP. And so when we look at the literature, I have only 4 minutes left, I guess. I will be quick as possible. So when we look at the literature, don't look at the 2022, you can see that both of the approaches, both fuzzy AHP and fuzzy ANP and AHP, they are both used commonly, and the usage rate is increasing. So what we see is an increasing trend from the numbers. But as you can see, the usage of AHP and ANP in the literature is much more higher than the fuzzy AHP and ANP. So what I said before is also true here. So we shouldn't try to solve, we shouldn't try to add fuzziness, because when we add fuzziness, it means that the complexity of the problem increases by the computational complexity increases. So it's not necessary for all the problems, but for some of the problems we need it. And this is what we can see from the literature. In the literature, still fuzzy AHP and ANP is less used by when it's compared to ANP and ANP, in not fuzzy classical AHP and ANP. And obviously fuzzy AHP is used more than fuzzy ANP when we look at the Scopus database. And also there are a lot of discussions on fuzzy ANP, which is, so what I can say that there is not a dominant approach on fuzzy ANP, which is accepted by a lot of people. And there are also lots of extensions of fuzzy sets in the AHP and ANP. There are hesitant fuzzy sets, hesitant fuzzy AHP, intuitionistic fuzzy AHP, Pythagorean fuzzy AHP, spherical fuzzy AHP, pure rank orthofoid fuzzy AHP, and so on. And these are used in various problems. And what you can see here is that intuitionistic fuzzy sets, intuitionistic fuzzy ANP and AHP are more common than, are more used than the other approaches. I don't know why, and I personally don't like that much this neurotrophic fuzzy sets, but neurotrophic AHP and ANP also has been used very much in the literature with and also what I like and what I like to use is hesitant fuzzy AHP and ANP, because in the hesitant fuzzy AHP and ANP, you can use the linguistic terms such as between, at least, at most, more than, in the concept of, so you can say that this is how we talk actually. Do you like this? Between like and not like, you can say something like this. This is how we use in our normal languages. So this is what I like with the hesitant fuzzy sets. You can use such an approach in the hesitant fuzzy sets. So hesitant AHP and ANP also have been commonly used, but the usage rate is lower than intuition.
Dr. Sezi, please complete it, please.
Yeah, okay, so sorry, I will finish right now. So when we look at the literature and when we look at deep in the papers, we see that you can see here which papers use AHP and ANP and which paper use fuzzy AHP and ANP. These are the journals that mostly publishes those two type of approaches. And what we see here is that when we look deeply is that usually AHP and ANP methodology doesn't change, the classical ones. And they are mostly used in the field papers, in the research area papers. So the methodology part of AHP and ANP, I think, is right now, this is not something that is discussed very commonly. But on the other hand, when we look at fuzzy AHP and ENP, they are mostly published in the methodological papers. So there are lots of new methodologies, new approaches. So there's not a dominant approach in the fuzzy AHP and ANP. So there is a difference between two approaches. So what I can say that AHP and ANP in terms of methodology is more mature. Now it's mostly used in the research areas, whereas fuzzy AHP and ANP, they are used and there are still new methodologies. So what I think in the future, I think that there will be some dominant approaches, which is not there yet with fuzzy AHP and ANP, there will be clear distinctions between where to use AHP, where to use fuzzy AHP, which type of fuzzy AHP we should use in which conditions. It will be clear in 10 years, but this is not there. We are not there yet. So thank you for listening. Sorry for the time delay.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Sezi. Now, any question, please, to Dr. Sezi? Is there any question?
I just, this is John Sadi. Thank you, Dr. Sezi. I was just curious, you showed sort of the difference between sort of classic and fuzzy in terms of journals. What do you see as like the best actual application areas for fuzzy? I mean, I'm not an academic, so I'm not that familiar with the journals, but what type of application would you say is a better application for the fuzzy approach?
What I see is that it varies a lot. So I think in any type of problem, you can use AHP. Here you can see that there is the papers from sustainability papers, there are energy papers, there are medical science papers. So there are environmental papers. So when we look at it, it's not like one dominant journal that publishes all these AHP articles. What we see in the AHP is more like in every field there may be possible to use AHP, which is I think great for a methodology.
Thank you. Any question? Any more question?
I have one. How do you deal with decision makers' fatigue problem? We see this. When we implement even AHP, if we have so many criteria, so many alternatives, the same thing with ANP, we have this problem. So we have to try to reduce number of criteria. And so how do you deal with that?
That's one of the major problems when we would like to use AHP. That's why usually in the literature, I see it's commonly used with TOPSIS methodology because it's if you have a lot of alternatives and if you have a lot of criteria, it's almost impossible to use AHP. And fuzzy AHP is also very complex. If you, for instance, if you would like to use an hesitant approach, you will use a linguistic term to define something and then alternatives. So it's too complicated. That's why I think in literature, there are best worst methodology kind of, or TOPSIS methodology, which is combined with AHP method.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.